Hello, Dawg Pound. As you've probably heard by now, Seaside Events and the Cleveland Browns have come together once again to plan the official Browns fan cruise aboard the amazing Royal Caribbean Liberty of the Seas, selling out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, March 3rd through 7th of 2025. I'm Nick Valinchek, and I can't wait to sail away with you on the second Browns fan cruise. This journey promises fun, adventure, and I'm sure we'll talk a little football on the way. For more information and to book your cabin, please visit brownsfancruise.com and let's gear up to paint the seas orange and brown. And I'm excited as we kick off our 2025 series of alumni interviews to talk with a man who needs no introduction. He was with the Browns, drafted by the Browns in the 4th round, linebacker out of Wisconsin, Joe Schobert. Joe, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate the informative and pumping me up on the introduction. It was great.
Well, there's very few things at 40 years old that I'm good at, so I try to stick in that realm and, do the best I can. I want to talk to you before we really get into things. I'm excited because it's Thursday, August 29th, and tonight we really get the first big slate of college football for the year. And you're a Wisconsin alum, and this Wisconsin team does not look the same now as it did back when you played there. I mean, sure, there's still going to be a focus on the running game, and you've got two good guys with Ches Malusi hopefully being able to rebound from the injury he sustained last year. He looked really good as a component there with Braylon Allen. You bring in Tawee Walker from Oklahoma, who they had like 7 backs that were really, really good last year. So, the pedigree's there. There's the Dairy Raid offense that kind of comes along with it. Tyler Van Dyke replaces Tanner Mordecai. He had a good year in 2021, which feels like decades ago now. I think the potential's still there. Great options at receivers. I think Will Pauling, one of the better possession receivers in college football. Bryson Green, who offers some unique downfield threat. We got Western Michigan on tap Friday. I'm not saying it should be a pushover because that team always, even after PJ Fleck left, it seems like that team has remained like relatively well coached. But what are your kind of feelings on where Wisconsin is headed in the 2024 college football season?
Yeah, I think you laid it out there pretty well right there. I think they're going to be on the up. I think Luke Fickell is going to do a great job. Obviously, you saw what he did at Cincinnati over the years building his program. This is his second year in charge, and I think with every year that he gets in there, his philosophies get instilled, the recruiting strategies get put into place and executed, and the kids buy into what he's doing. I think that Wisconsin's going to keep taking steps forward into the direction that we want to go and get back to where we deserve, or where we have always really been since at least when I was in college, in the college football landscape, of being at the top of the Big Ten, fighting for championships and going to college football. Well, it used to be New Year's Six bowl games. Now it's a college football playoff with the expanded playoff. Like getting ourselves back into that picture, I think is where we're headed. And this year it'll be hopefully against Western Michigan, one of my good friend, another former Brown, Justin Curry's alumni. Against those guys, and then South Dakota before we take on Alabama. I think those will be a couple good games to really kind of be a litmus test of where we are so far going in this year.
It's definitely probably the most interesting college football season in a long time, because not only are you expanding to 12 teams from 4, which is a huge jump, right? They're not even going to 6, but going straight to 12. I just don't feel like in the overall landscape of things, there's one team that really pops out like this is clearly the best team. Now, what I will say is Ohio State jumps to the top of that list. I'm a Northeast Ohio guy. I fully understand when Ohio State is like the preliminary favorite to make things, to win it all. Doesn't usually work out that way. So I'm kind of viewing this year as being a situation where like you can have some teams who are on the peripheral, like Missouri is a good example. I think they've got an upcoming defense. They've got really good. I mean, Luther Burden at wide receiver should be a mega star at the next level. Competent quarterback play, And not only that, but like just how the landscape of college football in general changes. Where, like you said, this is the second year for Luke Fickell at Washington or at Wisconsin, but and it's typically taken like 3, 4, 5 years for a coach to really get in there, instill his system, get his recruits to be there, to actually be on the field, to really show what they have to do. But now, like, things are really not a mess, but it really gets more interesting because of the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like that has impacted the game? Obviously, Wisconsin has been a team that has taken advantage of that with some pretty high-end quarterbacks. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put them at like the tippy top tier, but probably the tier right below that. I know Mordecai was a guy I followed for a long time at SMU, Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. So they've got some like good pedigreed quarterbacks coming in. How do you think that really does it put coaches on a hot seat more because they feel like they have to turn things around quicker?
Yeah, I think so, but I also think the transfer portal needs a little bit of refinement. There's a kind of you get the sense in football and I think more specifically in basketball, like when you go to the NCAA tournament, March Madness, and the interview, they're like, this year's leading scorer. He was the leading scorer on this March Madness team from the year before. It's like, well, why don't you just stick at your school and be obviously there's money involved and people are throwing money left, right, and center. But I think they need to figure out a little bit of a better way to instill a little bit more school spirit into some of these guys again, because you can't blame the kids for going where people are going to pay them to go, especially if they're not. You know, football is a dangerous sport. Inherent injuries are always a risk, and you never know if you're going to go to the NFL and make a lot of money playing football for a long time. So take it while you can get it. But at the price of costing a little bit of school spirit and a little bit of loyalty for the football players, kind of makes it interesting. And I also think that puts a lot of onus on the coaches, puts them on a hot seat fast, because you got to recruit new guys every year from high school, and you got to go recruit college kids who enter the transfer portal. Then you got to recruit your own kids to make sure they don't leave to go somewhere else in the transfer portal. And it's a changing game, changing dynamic, and I think that that's why a lot of the old coaches have kind of stepped out of it and are going on doing their own things, mostly TV money now.
I think it's a good thing in general. It raises the floor of quality of college football that gets played, because if you look at a team like Ohio State, they might have 3 literal like number 1 quarterbacks on their roster. But
Yep.
it's not going to stick that way, because these other guys need to be able to go somewhere to show that they deserve to be at the next level. But at the same time, it can't turn into a situation where it's a new team every year and someone has a 5-year college football career with 5 different teams. That's pushing it. All right, we talked enough about college football. I could sit here and talk college football all day. I love it. It's my favorite thing. I hope my wife doesn't hear this, or my child, but it's one of my favorite. I'm going to edit the statement. It's one of my favorite things in this world. I'm going to be useless for the next like 22 weekends, but it is what it is. Some might say I might not have much use the other 24 weekends or 28 weekends, however many there are. I want to talk a little bit now about your time with the Browns. How does it feel? I mean, I know that you weren't there on day one to hear your name called, but it still has to be one of those like, wow, I like this can't be real. I know that you had a great career at Wisconsin. You landed in the 4th round, but still, can you kind of go through the moments? And is it any different for the 4th rounders than the 1st rounders when it comes to like getting the phone call and finding out that you're going to be a part of the team?
I mean, I feel it's probably a little different because you sit there for 2 days watching people get drafted before you, and sometimes people you trained with, sometimes people you played with or played against. I know for me it was a little bit anticlimactic because I was like a 3rd, 4th round grade, so we kind of had our draft party the night of the 2nd and 3rd round just in case like you get drafted, people will be there. And then I got called since I was the first pick of the 3rd day because I was the first pick of the 4th round. I got called like 20 minutes before the draft was even going to start. So nobody at my house. I look at my phone like, oh, well, maybe it's it. Like the draft hasn't started. And they're like, yeah, we're going to take you first pick. And so like that moment you get, adrenaline's going, heart's pumping. But then it's like, all right, it's done now. And then you don't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to anybody for a couple of days because if you're not in the first couple of rounds, you don't like fly out the next day to go to a press conference or anything. You just wait until the rookie mini camp's about to start. So it was just like, all right, I got one phone call for 45 seconds. I'm going to go to Cleveland. now what? Just wait until
Yeah.
they tell me to go. So it's a little bit less. Mine was a little anticlimactic. Just the way the whole situation panned out because there's. I think my grandma had showed up to my house by then because we were gonna have like other people just come over and hang out during the day. But other than that, it was just me sitting in the living room at the moment in time.
Well, look at me opening up old wounds. Good job, Nick. You really did it this time. But
Yeah,
that's
no worries.
cool. You're at least able to celebrate it with grandma. I mean, that's still got to be one of those things where you hear your name called on ESPN or whatever it might be, and know that like, okay, I it's not guaranteed that I'm going to be there or be there forever, but I'm at least going to have my shot at the next level of football, which I think is really cool. I don't think I've really ever talked to anybody because no one has really brought up like the progression after you get drafted. So what was it like, when you have to come into that first mini camp and for rookies, is it a situation where you do rookie mini camp and I think that's like in May sometimes and then get a little break and then you go back into the formal training camp and preseason and all that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you do as rookies is come to rookie mini camp, and it's like 2.5 days of whatever 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. like camp, like true camp without pads on, but you have a walkthrough during the day, and then you have another practice, and then you have meetings, install workouts throughout it. So it's like a true camp day for 2.5 days, kind of getting you just thrown into the fire in terms of the schematics and the installs and all that, and then as soon as your mini camp's over, you go into the OTAs, wherever your team's at in that OTA schedule, and you have a couple of weeks of your OTA practices, and then you have mandatory mini camp at the middle endish of June. When I was a rookie, rookies had to stay another week or two for like the rookie symposium kind of stuff that was required. So like at the end of June, you were done with all that. You had like 5 weeks, 4 weeks off, and yeah, you come back for the start of training camp at the end of July. So
Yeah, it's really an insightful process. I don't think that we really understand often how a rookie gets like assimilated into the NFL. Obviously, somebody who, your path as a rookie is going to be different from what Deshaun Watson's looking at, and he's probably a bad example because he really didn't do a lot of the process coming off of injuries and things like that, but just how wildly different it is. So then you finally get to like the big show and you're with Cleveland for 4 years. What would you say are like some of the best memories that you had while you were a Brown?
yeah, I think we started off quite rough my first 2 years. So that was the 1-31 over 2 year stretches
Mm.
with Hugh Jackson as our coach. Um, but then in the third year, I think when Tyrod Taylor got hurt and Baker came in for a Thursday night game against the Jets, and we won that game, and then we ended up going 7-8-1. I think we were 2-6-1 at one point, and I think that's when Hugh Jackson got fired and Greg Williams took over as the interim coach. And I also had hurt my hamstring. Like we were 2-2-1 when I hurt my hamstring, and we lost like four in a row. So I was waiting on the sidelines, like vibes in the building aren't good on a 4 game losing streak. Hugh Jackson got fired right at the end of it, and then as soon as I came back, we played the Falcons. I remember Matt Ryan, and we won that game, and we were able to turn it around, and we went 5-1 after that at the end of the year, and like the whole city felt like it was riding on a high after the 1-31 2 years in a row, and we were a game away from the playoffs, um, playing for a playoff spot in the last week of the season. That season was one of my favorites, and then the season after, we were also competitive. And when you go 1-31 and then all of a sudden you go 7-8-1 or 6-10 or whatever, it feels like a major turnaround. So obviously, I missed going to the playoffs of Cleveland by 1 year. They went the year after I left, but to be part of that initial turnaround process from being literally in the gutter to getting back to competitive football was a good thing and something I'm proud of that I was a part of.
Yeah, I mean, I almost have to ask, and I think for like somebody who might live in like a different area, but I've literally lived in Youngstown, Ohio my whole life. So I'm 45 minutes to an hour away from the stadium. I've been a Browns fan off and on. I've been relatively an agnostic fan my whole life. I tend to follow players over teams, but the Browns have like forever been at least in my lifetime outside of the 80s, so let's talk like the 90s to kind of the time you're talking about, it has been just like a hard luck team. Like nothing ever seemed to go right. Whenever there was like a glimmer of hope, whatever the hope was would get concussed and be out for 6 weeks, and it was like the end of the run, and it's almost like a running joke, like the best time for Cleveland football is May to August, right? Like that's when hopes were the highest, and it's so now things have definitely shifted a little bit where I think the last, there's been some lulls here and there, but for the most part, the Browns have been a somewhat competitive to very competitive. I mean, they were literally like a play or so away from the Super Bowl, I think, a couple of years ago against the Chiefs where Chad Henne had to play quarterback. I forget if that was the AFC Championship game or if it was the round before that, but I mean, they were like right there. There's a lot of optimism coming into this year. I mean, but I guess my question here is, how is it playing in that situation where you're playing for like this snake bitten franchise? I have to imagine as the player, you're not looking at it like, man, this stinks. I could have got drafted anywhere. And of course I get drafted to Cleveland. I'd assume the competitive side of you knows and feels like, okay, I want to put all of my effort in to like turn this ship around. Right? Like that's kind of the feeling that you and the boys in the locker room have. It's not like, dang, here we are for another year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said, in the off season, there's always optimism. Everybody's working hard. You're putting a lot of work in to be successful on the field, and like for whatever reason, you're not. It gets a little like mind numbing just putting the same amount of work in, week out, and not being able to see results on the field. But I think that's where like the real professionals kind of separate themselves from the pack. So like going through all that toughness is obviously terrible in the moment, but it's also probably a good thing for players and some of the coaches to see who is actually working and who's actually getting better in the dire circumstances, and being able to keep those guys around and build a big core out of that is probably why they've gone from irrelevancy to relevancy in the last few years, because you got like the Joel Batonios and Miles Garrett's and all those kind of guys who have been through the thicket and came out the other side and kind of are linchpins of the team now in terms of culture and stuff. So it's something you really just, as a professional, as a competitive person, yeah, you're going to work your butt off every week. And the guys who don't kind of fall by the wayside.
Yeah, and I think the casual fan oftentimes really doesn't understand necessarily just the real, literal how thin the margin is between the best and least best player in the NFL. I'll never say like the worst. I feel like these are like sub 1% talents at what they do. There is no worst, right? There are varying levels of how good they are, but there's no like worst, right? I think that's something that fans really need to get it like out of their head. It's a bad way to approach things. And also the Browns, like really, I know that I would sit here and look and be like, okay, they lost by 3 points again. And you start looking at things and like, if that one play that should have been a touchdown just happens, this, 7-8-1 team might have been, 10-5 or 10-6 or whatever it was at the time. And it really shifts the whole, and it happened with the Browns like that for several years in a row. So, I mean, the game it's such a thin line between like success and failure in the NFL. One thing I want to ask you, one of my favorite questions to ask people is, you finish a game Sunday, you're in the locker room, you're kind of looking ahead to the next week. Was that what team, and specifically, was there a player on that team that you saw, okay, we're playing them the next week and I really want to stick them? Like this guy brings the best out of me, and I know he's such a high-level talent that it's going to bring the best out of me, and I'm excited to be able to show what I can do on the field when I see them on the schedule the following week.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who I would like look to like that. For me, it was more like you just need to know everybody's strengths and weaknesses you're going against, and that's like the main thing Monday and Tuesday. You're going into film watching, because even like throughout the season, great players get banged up and they're not playing great the next week, or like rookies come in, especially rookie running backs come in and they run hard for a couple of weeks until they get blasted by a couple of people on defense, and then they kind of fall off a little bit. So it's always a roller coaster of people's health and being able to play. But I'd say like when I was like a rookie coming in playing against like the Tom Brady's or the Aaron Rodgers or Phillip Rivers, and then or like Adrian Peterson as a running back when I would play against him, even though he wasn't his Minnesota Vikings running back, Adrian Peterson, but they call him all day for a reason, or Marshawn Lynch, like guys like that. You really want to play against because you grew up watching them and they've been great players for a long time. There's nobody who made me just want to be like, oh, I want to go stick it to this guy this week. I just, go out there and play well and help the team win, be your 111th on the field. But if you're sticking it to somebody, then that's just it's part of the game.
Yeah, when you're playing in the Big Ten, you're obviously playing with a lot of really good competition and a lot of guys you probably competed with at the next level in the NFL. But at the time, you guys are really still kids. You're 18, 19, 20-year-olds running around on the field, and then you get to the NFL and you're out there on the field. And actually, I want to say it was probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it was around the time you were there. I got tickets, like I'd finally started doing good in life and was getting ahead, and I bought second row tickets to see the Browns play the Patriots in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, I was like, this is probably like 7-8 years ago. I'm like, this is going to be Tom Brady's last year. Didn't turn out that way. Turns out Tom Brady played for a long time after that. But it was still just like sitting there and having gone to games, watching Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and guys like this. I'm on the sideline and you're just like, wow, this is like one of the greatest to ever play the game. What does it feel like when you look up, you got the adrenaline going, you're coming out on the field for the first time, and you look up and you're like, oh my God, I am directly across the field from Tom Brady?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like in the warm-ups, or like when you first see the people, like if you look up and see Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers, like all those kind of quarterbacks, Ben Roethlisberger, like that last, like the mid-2000s to 2020 generation of quarterbacks, like all-time greats. But like when you're playing on the field and you look up, like they're just guys, they're just competitors, and like they make mistakes too. They make less mistakes than some of the rookie quarterbacks around. But like once you get the helmet on and you start playing, it never really stuck to me. Like, oh my gosh, it was more like you see Tom Brady walking in the stadium off the bus in whatever Louis Vuitton or fancy little like outfit they have, and with all the cameras around, you're like, okay, like that guy's a big deal. Like this is somebody I've been watching since I was in second grade or something, playing football. Not going to go against him. But once you step on the field, it's everybody. Like you said, the margin of greatness to least greatness on the field isn't as high. You just got to learn to take advantage. Or for me, I was always just take advantage of the mistakes when they're made, and hope they don't take advantage of your mistakes when you make them. But I was never like looked up and got starstruck by any of those guys like during the game, because it was football, something you played your whole life, and you kind of find your like piece in it, and you know what you're supposed to do on the field. So
I think that's probably what makes the difference between like the ones who make it and stick around in the NFL. Just that mindset you have where you're like, yeah, he's Tom Brady, but he's still a guy on the field, and he throws interceptions, he fumbles, all these things. Whereas, like, I think the average, yeah,
he runs really slow.
Yeah, he's right. If he's trying to get out in the open field, he's pretty much a sitting duck, right? But yeah, it's just like that different mentality where I think the average person would be like, oh my God, I'm on the field with Tom Brady. Before their reaction time immediately is just dust, because they're just looking at the guy Tom Brady as opposed to like looking at the quarterback from the other team that you're being paid to make sure doesn't do well. So, football, your time of football has come and gone. I'm sure that you have a lot of memories that we'll hear about on the Browns fan cruise in March. What are you doing outside of the game now? Are you coaching? Do you have other business interests?
Oh, my wife owns a dance studio. We live out in Colorado, so I work the front desk at the dance studio a little bit. Try to keep the dancers in shape, make them a little more athletic here and there. In one of our classes, I help teach a class where they try to get them to jump a little bit higher and, be a little bit better of more core strength so that they can do their dancing a little bit better. But outside of that, I do a lot of fishing and hiking, mountain biking, skiing. Colorado's a big playground for that, so I'm always out and about and doing stuff.
That's awesome. I like the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, that's what has us here sitting today as well for me. I mean, so I always like to hear guys who are, and it seems like you've got a good balance of where like you're able to support your wife and what she does, but also like enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? You're able to go out and enjoy the things that you like to do. And I'm sure Colorado, like when you think about it, it has, whether you want to hike, fish, whatever you want to do, there seems to be quite a bit to do out in the Colorado area, so that's really awesome. But now I've really got to ask the important questions. Are you a cruiser?
I've never been on a cruise before, so this will be the first time. I remember growing up, I really, really wanted to go on a cruise a lot, and my parents, we never did, and I never have since I went to became an adult. So this is the first time. It'll be interesting for me. I'm looking forward to it,
Yeah,
though.
I think this is going to be cool. We have one in the book already where we've done, the inaugural one last year. The impressions I've gotten from everyone who attended on both the fan side and the alumni side were like, just can't wait to do another one. We're going to be going to the Bahamas. We're going to Nassau, which is something that everyone always enjoys. We're going to the perfect day at Coco Cay. It's going to be a fun time. Is there something that appeals to you, like that you're really excited about doing on the cruise?
Um, I'm not sure. I think stopping at the islands and being able to do a little half day, what all the events at the islands will be interesting. I've been into the Caribbean, but not the Bahamas, not Nassau. So it'll be interesting to see the events that get put on. I know there's a couple like beach events and being able to go and explore the little towns for a little bit. And I'll be interested to see what the buffet on the cruise is like, or what the food options on the cruises are like, because hopefully they cook up some good stuff out there.
I'm sure they will, and we have a lot of great activities planned. We've got, as Joe was saying, we've got some beach parties, we've got some parties on the boat, we've got question and answer sessions, trivia sessions. We're going to do some things so that you can have competition between the alumni, amongst each other, amongst the fans. So I think there will be no shortage of activities. So when I tell you about those activities, does anything jump off the page to you where you're like, oh man, that would actually be really cool to be a part of that with the fans?
Yeah, I mean, I always like Q&As because I think, like you said before, or like we were talking about rookie minicamp, there's a lot of stuff I think that goes on behind the scenes of the NFL that people really don't understand. And even if you kind of say it or you get a glimpse of it through locker room like interviews or stuff, it's not the same as like when you can ask questions, you can explain it in person. And then yeah, I'll be fun to compete against some of the alumni and whatever if we're doing trivia or whatever we're doing. I think it'll be fun to get a little bit competitive with some of those guys, past and present. Who some of the guys I know I've played with who are going on the cruise, and some of the older guys who I've met just they've been around practice and stuff. So it'll be good.
It's going to be a great time. And before we close here, I got to ask you, if you were making the last ditch sales pitch to people who are on the fence about coming, what would you tell them to get them to come on board?
Last ditch sales pitch to get people to come on board. I mean, you get to hang out with me. You get to hang out with some of the best who have ever played in the Cleveland Browns uniform, and you're going to be cruising around the Caribbean. I mean, if that's not selling it to somebody, I don't know what I'd have to say to them, because that's all you need to know.
I think that's the most impactful sales pitch you can make. You get to hang out with me. You get to hang out with my friends. We're going to play games. We're going to have a good time. And we're going to be, listen, Northeast Ohioers, I can guarantee you the weather in March in the Bahamas is going to be way better than it's going to be in Cleveland. So that in itself should just sell the decision. But Joe, as we head out of here, I want to thank you again for joining us, talking about your career, little college football, and the cruise. Are you a social media guy?
A little bit. I used to be bigger, not so much anymore.
Where can they find you on social media?
I don't even know. I really only have Instagram now. I think it's The Show Goes On, and the show is SCHO. I'm pretty sure, but that's probably the only place. Unless you're on Strava or something, one of the hiking apps, you can find me on Strava and follow all my hikes and runs and mountain bikes,
There you go, but don't stalk them. Just, admire from afar. Joe, again, we thank you very much. You can find us on Instagram at Browns Fan Cruise. That's all for today, Dawg Pound. Remember, the official Browns Fan Cruise is setting sail in March on the 3rd to the 7th, 2025, aboard the awesome Royal Caribbean Liberty of the Seas. Don't miss this chance to hang out with your favorite Browns like Joe. And fellow fans, for all the details and to book your cabin, head over to brownsfancruise.com. I'm Nick Valinchak, and I'll see you on board.